These are genius 10,000 IQ WWE moments when wrestlers outsmarted their opponents. Kicking off our list with Jeff Hardy being a genius and giving Edge a taste of his own medicine. At Extreme Rules 2009, Jeff challenged Edge for the World Championship, and the match was pure chaos. High risks, ladders, insane spots, it had everything. However, it was the climax of the match that showed Jeff using 100% of his brain. In the final stretch, when Edge was climbing the ladder, Jeff dragged Edge's legs and trapped him between the ladder rungs, making him unable to climb. The rated R superstar could do nothing but watch helplessly as the charismatic enigma climbed the ladder and won the championship. But even Hardy's cunning strategy pales in comparison to this next big brain moment when Randy Orton intentionally lost a match to retain his title. At No Way Out 2008, the Viper defended his WWE Championship against John Cena. Orton had put Cena on the shelf in late 2007, and the Chain Gang Soldier was hungry for revenge. Orton knew he was in danger of losing his title, and that's when the wheels in his head started spinning. After battling back and forth for about 15 minutes, Orton could see the title slipping away from his grasp, and that's when he did something extremely clever. Randy went right up to the referee and absolutely slapped the taste out of his mouth. The ref immediately called for the bell and disqualified Orton. Randy lost the match by DQ. But more importantly, he kept his WWE Championship. In championship matches, you only lose the title if you get pinned or submit, not by disqualification. Orton took the L, but still walked out with the gold. Speaking of Randy, let's talk about the time when AJ Styles was one step ahead of the Viper. After an intense back-and-forth battle, Styles had Orton reeling and was setting up for a phenomenal forearm. But AJ had studied the tapes and knew that every time someone goes for a high-flying move against Randy Orton, the Viper catches them with an RKO out of nowhere. So what did the Phenomenal One do? He changed his strategy and completely faked out Randy. Styles acted like he was going for the forearm but stopped at the last second, causing Orton to jump and miss his RKO counter. The crowd and commentators went wild for this 200 IQ play. But unfortunately for AJ, Randy Orton didn't become a 14-time world champion by being outsmarted easily. When Styles then attempted a splash, Orton was ready and caught him with the RKO anyway. But while AJ's big brain play failed, let's talk about the time when Gunther used every bit of his ring IQ to retain the IC title. During a title defense against Sheamus on SmackDown in October 2022, the Celtic Warrior locked in a painful submission hold that had Gunther in serious trouble. The crowd was going absolutely insane, thinking they were about to witness the end of Gunther's historic Intercontinental Championship reign. But here's where the ring general showed why he's one of the smartest wrestlers in the company. Gunther tapped on the mat 2 times, making it look like he was submitting. However, a submission occurs only when a wrestler taps the mat 3 times, not 2. Sheamus, thinking he'd won, slightly released the hold and let go of the pressure for just a moment. This momentary hesitation was enough for the ring general to reach the ropes and force Sheamus to break the hold. By the time Sheamus realized he'd been tricked, Gunther had already recovered and went on to retain his championship. It was a genius move that proved exactly why Gunther is called the Ring General. But even Gunther's big brain move was nothing compared to what John Cena did to Batista at Extreme Rules 2010. In order to win a last man standing match, you have to beat your opponent down so badly that they can't answer the referee's 10 count. Most wrestlers try to accomplish this by hitting their opponents with big moves, finishers, and weapons. However, John Cena decided to do something completely out of the textbook. During their 2010 Last Man Standing match, Cena and Batista beat the hell out of each other for several minutes. But instead of continuing to trade power moves with the 290-pound animal, Cena used a roll of duct tape and literally tied Batista's legs together to the ring post. The animal tried desperately to stand up, but with both legs bound, it was physically impossible. In a similar high IQ moment, Bret Hart outsmarted Goldberg instead of trying to outpower him. On an episode of Nitro in 1999, the feud between Goldberg and the Hitman had reached its boiling point. In a heated moment, Goldberg rushed at Hart and tried to tackle the Hitman to the mat, but instead knocked himself unconscious. Bret stood up and revealed that he had a metal plate underneath his shirt, and just like that, Goldberg was put to sleep. Speaking of big brain moments, you simply can't forget about the rated R superstar and his cunning heel tactics during the mid-2000s. During a triple threat match against The Undertaker and Batista, Edge literally crawled under the ring and pulled out clones of himself to escape the wrath of his opponents. Curt Hawkins and Zack Ryder, who resembled Edge, slid in the ring on Edge's behalf and took the punishment from Taker and Batista, while the rated R superstar recovered at ringside. With his opponents distracted by all the ensuing chaos, Edge simply picked the right opportunity and slid back in the ring to score the pin and walk out with the title. He wasn't called the ultimate opportunist for nothing. Samoa Joe has built his entire career on being an absolute savage in the ring, but sometimes his best weapon is just common sense. During his matches when his opponents try to hit him with a high-flying move, Joe simply walks out of the way and lets his opponent crash on the mat. It's such a simple concept that it's actually brilliant. Why would anyone willingly stand there and let their opponent jump on them anyway? But speaking of outsmarting your opponent, you gotta mention the OG, Eddie Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero was the master of mind games, and two of his signature tricks became legendary for their pure cleverness. First, there was the boot trick. At WrestleMania 20, Kurt Angle targeted Eddie's ankle and softened him up for the ankle lock. Eddie loosened his boot to lessen the pressure, and when Angle locked in the submission again, the boot came off and Eddie managed to roll up Angle for the win. But Eddie's most famous trick involved a steel chair. He'd throw the chair to his opponent, then immediately drop to the mat and act like he'd been hit with the chair by his opponent. The opponent would be standing there confused, holding the chair, while Eddie sold like he'd been knocked out cold. The referee would turn around, see the opponent with the weapon and Eddie laid out and immediately disqualify them. The Latino Heat truly was the master of lying, cheating, and stealing. It's a shame that the chair trick didn't work out for Dirty Dom when he tried to outsmart John Cena on Raw recently, but Kurt Angle took a page out of Eddie's playbook and used it against the Dead Man. At the Survivor Series in 2000, Kurt Angle defended the WWF title against The Undertaker. During the match, Taker dominated Angle and sent him flying outside the ring. However, in a big brain move, Kurt crawled underneath the ring and stayed hidden there. When Undertaker went looking for him, he pulled Angle out from under the ring and nailed him with a last-ride powerbomb. The referee counted to 2, but then stopped the count looking confused. The man inside the ring wasn't Kurt Angle. It was his brother Eric, who was dressed like Kurt. While The Undertaker was caught up in the commotion, Kurt rolled him up from behind and stole the victory. Years later, Kurt would use this same twin magic trick against Brock Lesnar to retain his championship. The man didn't win an Olympic gold medal for nothing. Speaking of gold medals, Randy Orton's counter of Shawn Michaels' signature kip-up into a pinfall deserves some kind of award of its own. And while we're handing out awards, let's talk about HBK's award-winning acting during his feud against The Undertaker. The Undertaker has been known as the master of mind games, but during his rivalry against Shawn Michaels leading to WrestleMania 25, the Dead Man finally met his match. HBK held a funeral segment for Taker where he mocked the Dead Man and promised to end the streak at Mania. The lights went out and Taker appeared in the ring, but Michaels was nowhere to be seen. Taker then turned his attention to the casket and suspected Michaels to be hiding inside it. However, when Taker opened the casket, Michaels wasn't inside. Instead, Michaels hid under the casket, and just when Taker had his back turned, HBK striked and nailed Taker with sweet chin music. Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn might argue constantly, but when these two work together, their combined IQ is off the charts. During their feud against the Usos, KO and Sami pulled off one of the sneakiest tricks in recent WWE history. Jay was causing distraction during Jimmy's match against Riddle, and that's when KO and Sami had enough. Sami grabbed a chair from ringside and tossed it at Jay, while Owens fell on the ground and pretended like he was seriously injured. The referee saw this and immediately ejected Jay from ringside, as KO and Sami took a page out of Eddie Guerrero's playbook to outsmart the Bloodline. Speaking of the Bloodline, let's talk about the time when Roman Reigns outsmarted Brock Lesnar. After an absolutely brutal last man standing match, Reigns realized that simply hitting Brock with moves wasn't going to keep him down. So Roman changed his strategy completely. He grabbed some of the wreckage from around the ring and literally buried Brock Lesnar under a pile of debris. Tables, chairs, equipment cases, everything got stacked on top of Lesnar. By thinking outside the box, Reigns proved exactly why he's the head of the table and why he stayed champion for over 1,000 days. But Reigns wasn't the only one to use a big brain strategy during a last man standing match. At Armageddon 2000, Chris Jericho faced Kane in a last man standing match. Jericho knew that trying to outpower the Big Red Machine was a losing strategy, and so he fought smarter instead of harder. As the match spilled outside the ring, Jericho's eyes landed on a huge stack of storage barrels near the stage. With Kane dazed, Chris seized the opportunity and knocked the entire stack over, causing them to crash down on top of the masked monster. Kane was completely buried under the barrels, unable to move or get up. Even with his incredible strength, there was no way Kane could push all those barrels off and get to his feet before the referee counted to 10. Sometimes beating a monster doesn't require superhuman strength, it just requires superhuman thinking. Speaking of superhuman, let's talk about Kofi Kingston's superhuman Royal Rumble save. Kofi Kingston has turned avoiding elimination in Royal Rumble matches into an art form, but his most genius moment came at the 2013 Royal Rumble. When Kofi landed on the announce table after being attacked by Ziggler and Tensai, Kofi used JBL's commentary chair like a pogo stick to hop his way back to the ring and avoid elimination. While we're talking about genius Royal Rumble moments, we gotta talk about the 1997 Royal Rumble. 1997 was a crazy year in wrestling with the debut of Kane, the Montreal Screwjob, DX running wild, but it all began earlier in the year at the Royal Rumble. Austin and Bret Hart were two of the final competitors left in the match, and when Bret threw Austin over the top rope, everyone assumed the Texas Rattlesnake was eliminated. However, the referees were completely distracted by the chaos happening elsewhere in the ring, so they never saw Austin get eliminated. Stone Cold realized this immediately and slid back into the ring undetected. He waited patiently for the perfect moment, then snuck up behind Bret Hart and threw him over the top rope to eliminate him, along with Undertaker and Vader to win the Royal Rumble. The Hitman was furious, screaming that Austin had already been eliminated, but since the referees never saw it, it didn't count. Was it cheating? Technically? Was it brilliant ring awareness? Absolutely. Austin understood that in wrestling, what matters isn't what actually happened, it's what the referees see happen. Dirty Dom used the same trick a few weeks ago on Raw during a battle royal to determine the #1 contender for the World Heavyweight Championship. Since the refs didn't see him get eliminated, Dom simply slid back into the ring and continued as if nothing happened. However, not every big brain play works out smooth. The 24/7 Championship created some of the most hilarious moments in WWE history, but R-Truth and Carmella pulled off something absolutely genius yet terrible during their reign. During a live episode of Raw, multiple wrestlers were searching everywhere for R-Truth to take his championship. They checked backstage, the parking lot, the locker rooms, everywhere. Meanwhile, Truth and Carmella were sitting in the audience the entire time, wearing disguises and pretending to be regular fans. The facade didn't last long as the wrestlers quickly noticed and chased after the duo. In a similar fashion, The Miz tried to outsmart the refs against John Cena, but got caught lacking. At Over the Limit 2011, everyone thought The Miz had done the unthinkable by making John Cena say, "I quit."
I quit!
The referee was about to award Miz the victory, but something seemed off. That's when the referee looked around and spotted a cell phone near ringside. The official picked it up and realized that Miz and Riley had recorded Cena saying, "I quit" earlier and just played it over the phone's speaker. This was the same trick The Rock pulled on Mankind years ago, but this time, the referee was paying attention. While Miz's high IQ strategy backfired, let's talk about one of the biggest genius plays in recent memory. Seth Rollins has always been a master of mind games, and he proved it during SummerSlam 2025. Leading to the event, everyone thought Rollins was injured and would be on the shelf for at least 4 to 6 months. So when Rollins confronted Punk after his title win at SummerSlam, everyone thought Rollins was just playing mind games. However, the Visionary revealed the injury to be a ruse and dropped his crutches in one of the most shocking reveals in modern WWE history. But ironically, just a few months later, Rollins suffered a legit injury that forced him to vacate the world title. Speaking of titles, what about the iconic IC title feud between Jericho and Rey Mysterio that turned into a high IQ chess battle? For a masked wrestler like Rey, the mask isn't just part of their outfit, it's their entire legacy. Jericho understood this better than anyone, and during their match at Extreme Rules 2009, Jericho took off Mysterio's mask and rolled him up for the win. However, during their rematch at the Bash, Mysterio was one step ahead of Jericho when Y2J took off Mysterio's mask, only to find out that Rey had another mask underneath it. Speaking of Jericho, check out this video next about how WWE can book the perfect Chris Jericho return in 2026.